Okay, so last week we were exploring this question: can we bring about a transformation of consciousness, global transformation of consciousness? So this was what, continuing on from the previous week, that Thich Nhat Hanh was speaking about. But this is what's needed. Nothing less is going to be an adequate response to the problems that we are facing. And I think that observation, first of all, I feel that it's very clearly true, and you can approach that from many different points of view to see that although proposals for kind of technological solutions and whatever different kinds of answers that are circulating very widely in the climate change movement. And I was, enthusiastic part of this for many years. I still am, but in maybe a slightly different way, because within that very large community of kind of climate activism, there is a great deal of emphasis on political kind of campaigns and technical solutions and so on. These are all very, very important. As Thich Nhat Hanh was at pains to say, the technical solutions are important, but they are not enough by themselves. The problem has been created by a faulty mindset, a mindset that really kind of came together about 400 years ago in the 17th century scientific revolution, that dominates the thinking of our civilization, and that was probably very helpful in the 17th century. And now it's become very, very unhelpful, destructive, dysfunctional. It has outlived its usefulness, and it has become, it's degenerated, it's, become even more dysfunctional. And some people are pointing out and saying, well, it's because this way of thinking and way of organizing society and way of organizing the economy and so on is no longer helpful, useful, what's needed. And therefore, the most capable, wise, intelligent people are not looking to, careers in politics and so on. These big structures that are now have gone out of whack, out of control, and are continuing to propel our civilization on a course towards destruction. And so without the change in that mindset, these kind of technical solutions, whatever, these are really just, sticking plaster when what we have is potentially terminal sickness of our society. So I'm quite convinced that Thich Nhat Hanh is absolutely right when he says that what we need is a transformation of global consciousness. We spoke about that last week. And in the email I sent earlier, I said, oh, this might just be happening right now. So I can't remember having had such a powerful response to a new initiative as I've had in the past week. It was actually, the morning of our call last week, I got an email about this event called Humanity Rising, Global Solutions Summit, and I wasn't sure because I couldn't see the program. And the following day I looked at the program and I thought this looks good, and I signed up. And I was much more impressed than I'd expected to be. And I'm going to just say a few words about what it is so that you understand, because that's going to inform what I want to say about how this process of transition that we are in is unfolding at the level of collective consciousness. And in line with what Thich Nhat Hanh is saying about what's needed, this collective awakening. Because it has seemed for a long time that this isn't going to happen, it can't happen. And the reason that it seems that way is because the structures that are in control and the people that are in the high positions in those structures, if you like, are not responding to that call. And it's been there for 50 years. I would date it to probably 1972 when the report of the Club of Rome, Limits to Growth, came out. So this was a very high level group. I don't know how much you all know about it, but that it was a very high level group that convened a big research program at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a computer model of the entire world system and where it was headed and whether it was sustainable. And the conclusion was that we had maybe 35 years to turn things around, or the global ecosystem would start to collapse. And their predictions turned out to be very accurate indeed. And this message was around the world, and the world leaders saw it, and nothing happened, basically, and nothing has happened up till now. So it can look like, well, there's no hope. It's too late. We can't. The political will is not going to happen. And without the political will, we're doomed. And I think there's a different way of looking at what's happening that is much more hopeful, actually. As I say, those structures of the world economy and global governance and so on, and nation states, etc., are becoming more and more out of tune with what the world needs, what our society, our civilization needs in order to be in a healthy condition. And when that happens in a complex system, a living system, when it is in a state that is fundamentally destructive to the health of the system itself, often what can happen is that there is an unusual kind of change. It's called a shift, a state shift in complex systems theory. Complex systems can reach a point where they become unstable, and it seems as though there's a structure there that is not changing, and then it can suddenly dissolve and change into something quite different. And when I talk about this, I think, I'm very vulnerable to the accusation that I'm just guilty of completely naive optimism, imagining that suddenly all this very, very negative stuff is going to turn around. So when I saw this conference starting, I say it's a conference, a bit more than a conference. So this is happening every day for 4 months at least. And each day there is a group of very high level individuals with different projects around the world that have potential to, transformative potential at a global level. So just to give one example, one of the first speakers was from the World Economic Forum, and they have launched a project. Now, to preface this, a few years ago, I was very inspired by one of my environmental heroes, Wangari Maathai, the founder of the Kenyan Greenbelt reforestation movement, who became the environment minister for Kenya, completely inspirational woman. And she launched a 1 billion tree project. And I thought, this is great. And I checked on it a little while later, and I discovered that they had outstripped their target by 7-1. This was in about 2010, I think. About 10 years ago, 7 billion trees have been planted. Wow, that's great, I thought. But I did some arithmetic and I realized we need far more than that. So this person from the World Economic Forum on Friday, the opening session of the Humanity Rising, the Global Solutions Summit, told us that they have launched a 1 trillion tree project. 1,000 billion trees are to be planted. And I was convinced that they were not talking pie in the sky. They have an achievable plan. They are already on track to achieve that plan. And the result, by the way, the result of my arithmetic was we probably need about 1 trillion trees. That is about the number that we need to restore the planet to health, as far as, you know, the trees play a part in that. And they are extremely important. They're one of the most important features of ecosystem, global ecosystem health. So this was a very practically focused project by people who have the connections and expertise to know what they're doing. They're also looking at ways to fundamentally transform the parameters of the global financial system. At the moment, ecosystem services, which are, you know, basically the wealth that we derive from nature itself, they are not in the kind of accounting system which is used to determine profitability and economic viability and so on. Those ecosystem services that we receive for free are assigned economic value 0. So destroying those vital ecosystem services is not seen as having a negative effect on the economy. That's an accounting convention. They can be valued. They have been valued, and they are valued at, this person told us, $125 trillion a year, which is twice the global GDP. So the human economy is half of the economic benefit we receive from nature freely. And if those ecosystem services were costed into the accounts, it would be impossible to have, you know, major ecologically destructive projects for the purpose of financial gain. So what we're talking about here is basic change to the structures that are in place that are creating the damage. So this conference is bringing together each day 8 to 10 people who have different projects addressing different aspects of this global situation from different viewpoints. And the aim is to put it all together into a comprehensive strategy to repair the planet. And basically to bring us to a different world order, an ecological world order, to put that in place. And as it's progressed over the past, this is now day 6, I've become increasingly convinced that it is by far from impossible that they will succeed. So obviously I am a very naive optimist. Anyway, I wanted to let you know about it. And I don't know if you've all watched any of the summit, but I want to share it widely, and I'm participating myself. I'm signed up for the webinars, which gives me more of an opportunity to connect with the people that are actually doing this. Anyway, I'm not really, so much interested in telling you about my personal participation. It might be nice to know that, but it's about, it's very interesting to me that at this particular moment, this has come together, because I suspect it could not possibly have come together any sooner, because those different projects, which are people working in different fields in different parts of the world. There's some indigenous tribal leaders. There are some leaders of women's issues. There are people in economics. There are people in, arboriculture and permaculture, and people in spiritual movements. Interestingly, a lot of these people they have professional expertise in one of those other fields, but they are leading meditations as part of their presentations, and they're clearly experienced in doing so. So the coming together of spirituality and practical initiatives is a very salient feature that is, I'm interested to see how many people at the top level globally in their own fields are bringing that kind of perspective and bringing spiritual practice clearly into their professional practice. So all of that takes time to mature, is what I'm saying. You know, the ecology movement in the 1970s was very vibrant and very global, but it was extremely young. I mean, it was very, very new. It really kind of began to any significant degree in the early 1960s with the publication of Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. So someone's just joined. I'm going to just say hello to him. Okay. Yes, so things take a lot of time to mature. So these proposals, um, I mean, what's being presented are not proposals. What's being presented at the moment are things that are already being done, major projects around the world that have the potential to um, change the, move the goalposts in terms of the health, ecological health of the planet. Um, and there are a very great number of different ones that all kind of, when you start to hear about them, you can see they fit together so that they each reinforce each other. They've all needed many years to develop the ideas, to bring a community together around the ideas, to spread those ideas, connect with other actors in the field, so that the organizations that are represented at this Global Solutions Summit are mature and powerful organizations, but they have not really, until this moment, been able to connect together into a an overall strategy. So what we're talking about, okay, here is, at the moment, we're in very deep trouble because those who are in control, if you like, so, I mean, I'm not just talking about heads of state, but obviously heads of major corporations, particularly of financial companies who are, they're even more invisible usually. People who have this kind of global reach, if you like, within the present world order, is all determined by economic factors. And right now, the whole project of running the world on economic profit as the primary criterion is in deep trouble. The price of oil has dropped to $3.50 a barrel in America. It was even negative a short while ago. So the fossil fuel-based growth economy is looking very, very weak, partly as a result of COVID-19, but also as a result of more long-term, deeper trends, if you like. And as I say, the organizations and movements that are organizing around the ecological imperative have grown, have matured, have become more powerful, wiser, have connected together more. And interestingly, as I mentioned, they are more understanding the fundamental importance of spiritual principles being incorporated into their work. So now this meeting is happening. It's a kind of, I mean, it was, at least 4 months, at least until the end of September. But the framing was, it will continue for as long as necessary, and perhaps a decade or more. And the objective is very clear: to formulate a strategy to put in place an ecological world order by 2030. And as I say, it's interesting to see that this is not just a kind of technical or practical or economic plan, but it is very much a conscious um, articulation of the intention to create a transformation of global consciousness. So this is something that is going to involve, of course, many, many more people, organizations around the world, but it's a focal point that I think is fundamentally new. It's a new stage in the development, the evolution of the ecology movement and of the movement of spiritual awakening, which has been going on alongside that, particularly since the Second World War, with the transmission of Buddhism, especially from Japan, but other countries to the West, and then from 1959 onwards of Tibetan Buddhism, of course, and that's been gathering strength and spreading, not so much in terms of people who've signed up as, paid up card carrying Buddhists, but much, much more widely, people participating in those spiritual practices and adopting essentially that point of view, that spiritual perspective, whether it's come to them from Buddhism or Sufism or Christian mysticism or indigenous spirituality, Native American or other forms of indigenous spiritual wisdom. It's spreading. It's kind of virally, isn't it? I mean, we can sense it, I think. Even if it's not so visible on your street, by now I think it must be clear that it is spreading more and more widely and very quietly underneath the radar of the media. It's happening. And so what we're doing here, I've said this many times, even though we're a very small group here today, what we're doing here, we should not underestimate the significance of this. It's not about numbers, but it's about how clearly we bring to awareness this different perspective, different from the dominant culture of the West up to now, that sees through the illusion of material, economic growth and so on as being the key to human well-being, to the deeper truth that it is the flourishing of life and spirit. They are not, of course, two. It's one thing. That is important. Okay, so, and I think something is important to recognize is that this, very perilous situation that we're in, and the appalling, things that have been happening, ecological destruction, economic and social injustice, the discrimination and continuing, really, genocide of indigenous people, still happening, particularly I think in the Amazon, but in other places too. These negative things that they clearly, if anything's negative, those things are negative. But it is that darkness, if you like, that dark side of what's happening now, partly that has stimulated this extremely powerful and deep spiritual and ecological and political response. That this must not continue. We must, transform our way of being, our way of living. And this is in alignment with, the principle of interdependence, that enlightenment, where I don't know if I was to ask you this as a sort of question in a Buddhist class. Okay, so what is enlightenment interdependent with? Is a textbook answer. Enlightenment arises independence upon suffering. Without suffering, there would be no enlightenment. There would be no motivation for enlightenment. There'd be no reason to want to become enlightened. We wouldn't know. We wouldn't guess that there's such a thing. And I think this is now happening at a global level. And the question is, is this awakening going to spread fast enough, reach deep enough in time to change the possibilities of the future from the comprehensive um, destruction which has been, we've seen this a lot. We've seen, and it's very important for us to see it, very important for us to see the negative possibility, what could happen if we don't wake up, what could happen with severe climate change and all of the impacts that that would have is something truly terrifying. Extinction of almost certainly well over 90% of all species, probably 90% of humans. Some think it would be the extinction for humanity itself. I don't think that's actually the most probable outcome. But what we've already talked about, when you can connect with it, with your imagination, with your intuitive mind, rather than just numbers, facts and statistics or whatever, if you can connect with the reality of what that would mean, and if you also can hold and maintain in your mind the thought of the possibility that it could turn around, we could wake up, it might happen, it may happen. If we do, it will be very different. If we can hold those two things in our mind, then the result will be not despair, which is not useful, or complacency, everything's going to be okay. Some people do tell themselves nice stories which don't really connect with the reality of what's happening and the gravity of the situation that we're in. So we need to face that dark side of the possible future in order to manifest a deep enough response. So, we need to believe in that possibility. And I have to say, my belief in it has greatly strengthened through attending the first few days of this event. I do think it's a very significant, pivotal event, possibly. We need to connect with a belief in that possibility. And we also vitally need to connect with the possibility that each of us individually has a significant part to play. Because it's a piece of spiritual work to transcend our limited perception of what we are capable of. So this is a journey, and I am kind of wary of the danger of sort of putting onto people a sense of responsibility to do more than they feel they can do right now. Everyone has to go at their own pace. Everyone has to tune into what the situation is calling them to do personally, because your contribution will be unique. Only you are able to, to tune into what that is. It's not what somebody else says. It's when you yourself are willing to look at this situation, the ecological crisis that we're in, to open your eyes to it and say, okay, although this is very frightening, I won't be dominated by fear. I won't retreat into my shell of despair or escapism. I will acknowledge that it's there and that there is hope and that I have a part to play. And maybe I don't know yet quite what that part is, but I can open my mind and my heart to be receptive. And that call will certainly come. It may take some time, but and it could be anything. Could be growing vegetables, could be meditating, could be, becoming a world leader. Yeah, I don't, yeah, an artist. You know, um, I am not prescribing what is your part in this. It's a vast jigsaw puzzle of humanity, and no two pieces of that puzzle are identical, and they all fit together. We just need to find where we fit into that big jigsaw. And then we can kind of stop worrying about, is all this going to succeed or not? If I know what I'm called to do, then I can do that and I can have peace in my heart.